Hello, everybody. Here we go again. I think this is 267, number 267, and we already have a question. Eduardo asks, "Hi, Eddie. Hope you are doing well. I am. Thank you. I have a question. I heard that Wynton Marsalis plays long tones every day, each note for an entire minute, very, very soft. What are the benefits of such practice?" So I can only give you what my understanding is based on not based on any person, just based on my experience as a teacher and as a player. I think when you do that, it's very close to what Carmine Caruso used to teach. And it all comes down to what we've been talking about with familiarity. Hello, Larry. Hello, David. It all comes down to what we talk about with familiarity. And now before we go into the familiarity, let's talk first about the strength side of it. I don't, you'll never hear me talk much about strength in that regard. Yes, we do need to have more strength to a certain degree. You guys have heard me talk about this. But obviously, someone like Wynton already has that kind of strength. But there is a strength that can come from playing soft because, I don't want to sound like I know the science or anything like. You guys have heard me talk about the science stuff too. Oh, my hair is like, I just know that sometimes when you're playing softly, it takes more strength than when you're playing loud, and I know that contradicts what I've been saying. A lot of these things are not. That's why we've been talking about how it's not scientific. And this is why when you listen to one person talk and another person talk, it can sound like it's completely different. But it's true. Playing really, really soft can wear you out. And what I would have to say is that probably, we've been talking lately about fatigue that comes from playing loud. I don't think one cancels out the other. I think when you play loud, you are using different muscles. And you're using those muscles a different way. But I actually do believe that when you play softly, you are actually using different muscles. Now, let's also talk about a second reason why soft, long, static, we call these static long tones, right? Let's also talk about why static long tones if you're playing very, very softly, static long tones can help you develop more control. It takes more control to play in the extreme dynamics. It's just as true for playing loudly, but it's also just as true for playing softly. So, like if we are playing soft, almost to the point of whisper tones, that takes control. That takes a massive amount of control. Most of my students can't do it. Most of my students cannot hold a long, long, long note at close to the whisper tone volume. So you can be, it helps you work on control. And what kind of control are we talking about? We're talking about air control and aperture control. Basically controlling your embouchure and your air. But I do think that the most important benefit of doing an exercise like that, now I will clarify, I don't practice anything like that. Okay, I don't like static long tones. I've been avoiding static long tones since I was, the mid 80s. I don't like static long tones. Do I think that static long tones are bad? They're bad for me. They're bad for me. Are they bad for everyone? I can't tell you that. You have to find out for yourself. Um, so, talking about the familiarity thing. If you are playing, and this is whether you're playing soft or loud, the longer you make that note, the more familiar you become with all the physical aspects that go into playing that note. The longer the note is, so when we talk about familiarity, that familiarity happens on a variety of different spectrums, right? Um, so we have familiarity with the song, familiarity with the technique, right? Like being able to do something. We have familiarity with the notes themselves. We have familiarity with the frequencies and stuff like that. So this familiarity happens in a whole bunch of different ways. And one of those ways is actually, how does the body feel when it's doing that thing? So when we play a long, 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 long note, we are becoming more familiar with how the fingers feel, with how the horn, because you're more familiar with the angle of the instrument for that note. You're more familiar with the air and the resistance to the air. More familiar with how the embouchure has to be set. Now, let me tell you what I don't like, for me personally, about static long tones. First of all, if those are the only long tones you're doing, then you're missing a big, big, big piece of the puzzle. Why would I say that? We need familiarity, right? That's what drives what we do. We need that familiarity. But if the familiarity is with a single note, then the logic of that is kind of missing. What we want is familiarity from this note to that note, because this reminds me, my brothers were jocks, and back when I was on the pep band, and don't get me wrong, I was never a big sports person. um Back when I was in the pep band at UTEP, I was in the pep band to make money. It was a paid gig. I think we made like $50 per game. And I was complaining to my brothers, both of them. And I might have told you guys this story before. I was complaining to my brothers. I said, I don't know, I don't understand how anybody could miss a free throw. The ball is the same. The court is the same. The hoop is the same. The backboard is the same. And my brother's Jeff, my brother Jeff, had some deep, deep wisdom that I've long since learned from in a whole bunch of other contexts. He says it's not the ball that changes, it's not the hoop that changes, it's not the distance, it's none of that changes. It's you who change. Your ability to do something at the beginning of a game and at the end of the game are two different things. And wow, what a great piece of wisdom. And if we apply that to the long tone thing, that's sort of like only ever practicing a free throw when you're fresh. And there's a whole bunch of things they explain to me. It's not just your physical fatigue or whatever, it's also about where your mental state is too. And so, yes, if you're doing static long tones, I'm not saying there's no benefit, but look at what you're missing. You're missing that relationship between this note and that note. Okay. Um, and but also, I changed my embouchure. I've told you guys this in 1985-ish, somewhere around there. And the long tones were part of what really, really screwed me up. The long tones and the lip slurs. You'll notice that my book, my routine books, the lip slurs are different because when I changed my embouchure, when I rebuilt, I swore I would never practice those old lip slurs ever again. And it's the same thing with the long tones. I swore I would never go back to practicing um, static long tones again. And I was thinking about this actually yesterday when I was practicing, because the people that do those traditional lip slurs, right? They're amazing. But when do you do that on a piece of music? You don't. You don't ever. The closest thing we have to that is um like a shake or a lip trill. But the ability to do those kind of lip slurs is not musical. When people do my routines, even though I consider it exercises, people say that my routines are the most musical exercises they've ever played. And that's for a reason. That's for a reason. Um, I think the best way, I'm reminded of Lou Soloff. I went to a Lou Soloff master class in the 80s, and I actually met him personally on a gig one time because a band I was playing in was on one side of the hall, and a band he was playing with in was on the other side of the hall, and it was the gig was the Italian club here in Houston, and the band he was playing with was a band out of Los Angeles, but the guy was from Houston. Um, I forgot the guy's name. He's a music producer for movies, and uh, when his singer didn't show up, he sang on the movie. I think when Harry Met Sally or something like that, one of those movies, and he launched his singing career by sitting in for himself on a session like that. I forget the guy's name, but he's from Houston. Um, Big Italian family here in Houston. Um, so he used to do all the Italian shows, and then we used to do the Italian shows. And so I met Lou Soloff. But anyway, that that uh, masterclass that he gave, he said he refuses to do. This is Lou Soloff. He refuses to do exercises. He says he'll just most of the time improvising, right? He'll play something melodic to get him the same result as what the exercise is going to do. Now, was he like that all the time? I don't know, but that's what I heard him say in the master class. He also talked about mouthpieces and stuff like that. Um, I think he's the first one I ever heard say that he plays on multiple different mouthpieces. Um, so yeah, I learned a lot from Lou Soloff. But anyway, so we're talking about the long tones. I know I'm going on about this. Um, but yes, uh, I'm not a big fan of the static long tones. You can do them. There are benefits also, like if you do static long tones, you are more likely to have swelling in the lips, and it's not necessarily bad swelling. And the swelling can stabilize what you're doing so that you crack fewer notes and stuff like that. Anyway, let me move on to a different question. Hello, David. Hello, Larry. Do you have play-alongs for the trumpet duet books? In particular, 20 trumpet pioneer duets and 20 trumpet Tyro duets. No, I don't. I have, I was going through those duets with a student, and I thought I really should have for that, but I don't. So I'm sorry about that. Karen says, Eddie, why can't it be a science? 1 + 1 equals 2. That's why it's artistic, I guess. Yeah, the reason why it can't be a science. Let me share screen and show you um, the what's that aberration of what we call science today. I'm going to pull up my chart. When we talk about human science, it is rarely scientific. Okay, here we go. When we talk about human science, it is rarely scientific. When we do, like, let's say the researchers just finished their research, and this is what one of the charts looks like. You'll have a line that goes like this, and then you'll have all these dots. These dots. Now, the rest of the dots are closer to the line, right? That's why the line is there, because you've got most of the people are here in this area, right? But what about this guy? And what about that guy? And what about this guy? And what about this guy? And what about this guy? So you can almost say, when they do this research, you could almost say, well, most people, but the truth is, It's normally not even most people. The only way you could say most people is if you measured it like this. Now it's most people. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Human research is not science because it's different one person to the next. We all have different bodies. We all have different minds. We all have different experiences. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different desires, goals. There is no way for anything in that sort of context to be considered scientific. There's no way. And yes, the artistic thing has something to do with that. And I kind of covered that in what I just said here. So that chart that I just showed you is a typical medical thing. Let me tell you what I learned about medical science, about medical research. Who does the medical research benefit? Does it benefit the patient? Does it benefit the doctor? Does it benefit the administration at the hospital? The answer to all those is no. The reason why the research is done is for the benefit of the insurance company. That's what the research is for. When they do research on a drug, they want to know how many people are going to get sick on this drug, how many are going to be okay, how many people are just not going to respond at all. It's not to heal people. It's so that the insurance company can pay your bills without going without going bankrupt. That's what modern day research is for. Now, if they come up with a new drug, you can say, well, that's more scientific. It's still the same thing. You're still working with people. And there is no drug that works for everybody. We all know that. Right? And why am I saying that? Because just as human as medicine is, the topic of music is exponentially more human. It cannot be scientific. Anytime someone tries to make it scientific, they are pulling something over on you. They are trying to con you and manipulate you. I know this is like the third or fourth week in a row that we've talked about this. Oh my. Larry says, Eddie, don't know where the S came from. Two Eddies, one nice and one evil. Oh my. Hello, Seppo. Nice to see you. Karen says, are you familiar with the Mouthpiece Spock commercial? Whoa. L5513MV. No, I'm not. The 5MV is the same diameter as the flugelhorn one I like. Okay, so you did your homework. That's great. So MV would be, if it's anything like, now we consider the V cups, the medium V cups, we consider them to be more commercial, whatever that's supposed to mean. But if you try it and you like it, you should play it. I would recommend, if it is the same one as the mouthpiece on the flugelhorn that you like, I would recommend trying that mouthpiece, the 5MV, right? Not the other one. But no, I'm not a familiar. I'm sorry, I'm burping. Uh, Not burping, hiccuping. I'm sorry. Um, Seppo says, I have recommended to some of my students to free buzz statically for 1 minute per day in conjunction with brushing the teeth, aiming to routine acting. How do I think on this? I think that's all right. I think a minute might be a little too long, but that's, it's, I say too long, but so, yeah, I for the most part, I don't have a problem with it. For the most part, I don't have I do think 1 minute might be too long. And so why should I say that? Why would I say that? Um, because of the static nature of it. I have my quick warm up that I think is free on the website. Every week I ask myself, right, is it free on the website? And I go and look. I'm pretty sure it's free on the Tiger Music site. Um, and in that I have first we do a static long tone, and the static long tone should be one full breath. So it's not about how long you do it as much as it is that you take a nice big breath. That's the first exercise. Then we want to do an improvised melody. Something like that. And then that's the end of the lip buzz for that warm up. I hope that makes sense. So that's, the improvising a melody takes the static nature out of it. But you'll notice that even with both of those together, it probably wasn't a whole minute. I wasn't timing, but that probably wasn't a whole minute. Eduardo says, by the way, Eddie, I'm becoming really addicted to the tonalization studies. Hey, congratulations. We like that. Yeah, we like that. Uh-huh. There's times when I wrote these routines, right? And I invented the routine system in, like I said, 85, around there. And sometimes the routines just get to be such a drag. So, I mean, like what I'm trying to say is I've been doing them for so very, 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 very long. And even though I have different ones, I do different days, and if I'm bored with the new ones, I can go back to the old ones, and even then I can even do improvised ones. So it's not so bad. It's not like doing the same one every day after day after day after day. But sometimes I just get tired of doing a routine, and I'll just do the tonalization studies. And it's nice. All right. David says science is only one path to knowledge, and it may not be the best. Science ignores the metaphysical. That's right. That's right. You guys hear me often say, we talk about stuff because there's so much that I learned in school that now that we have the internet, You can look it up and you find out that what you were taught was not true. Now, of course, remembering that I'm an INTP and that INTPs in their early lives struggle to understand people, I openly admit that what I thought they taught me might have not been what they meant. I understand that my capacity to misunderstand people, especially when I was younger, was huge. So, but still, um, there's stuff that I teach today that either I know that for sure it wasn't true, or there's questions about it that make it possibly not true. And I call it trumpet lore. And I'm if I find out some of these trumpet lore things are not true, that will not stop me from teaching them. I will just put a disclaimer: this is not true. Right? But what I've learned is that the stories, whether they are true or not, have a meaningful impact on a person's playing and can change the way you think. So whether it's true or not, so in other words, what I'm saying is sort of like the entirely opposite of something scientific. You're actually going as far as to say such and such is not true, but I'm going to tell you the story anyway because of the impact that story can have on your trumpet playing. So yeah. Karen says, "Wow, you sound like a kazoo." Yeah, we should always strive to get the best sound um on our lip buzz. But here we go again, right? The truth is, it's not possible. The most important thing for your lip buzz is the frequency. If you have a lip buzz that's down here, you have the wrong embouchure. That's a French horn embouchure or a trombone embouchure. Okay, we don't play like that. So we want a buzz that's at least in the treble clef. Okay, we want at least something in the treble clef. And if you're not in the treble clef, no, not to worry. Just keep working on it. David says, I have started writing out my practice as you recommended. It makes for a much more focused and powerful practice. It leads to better progress. That's correct. That's when I talk about the power of the art of accumulative practice. You cannot have accumulative practice without some sort of log. It is impossible to have those benefits. That's not the only thing required, but it's one of the biggest things. Talking about in the context of learning how to play, how to practice accumulatively. If you don't write it down, you accumulate nothing except for feelings. So when you log it, you know, Pearl was cleaning out the back office, and she pulled out one of my old notebooks that had the old logs in it. And I could look back and see how organized I was, whatever it was, 15, 20 years ago. And I was practicing a whole bunch more then than I am now. right? And so the book, it's just full of page after page after page after page after page. Um, Seppo says, do you have any recommendations of exercises on big intervals amid aiming to build one's embouchure muscles? Um, I'm not convinced right now that that's how we build the strength. So the interval stuff that I teach, which includes the lip slurs and the tongued intervals, those are not for strength. Those are for familiarity. Now, familiarity does give you strength, but that's not the reason why we do it. Um, with what I'm going through right now, I've got a bunch of gigs. So it looks like this November and December are going to be just like the good old days in terms of how many gigs I've got. And I'm just a little bit worried, just a little bit, because I did have issues with endurance on that one brass gig. And I don't want that to come back again. So I really think if you want to build strength, based on what I've learned in the last few years, if you want to build strength, practice louder. So you can practice interval stuff, but I really do believe that if you want to build strength, what you really need is volume. What you really need is volume. So I wouldn't be able to give you an exercise recommendation based on what you're asking, because I wouldn't do it that way. Am I saying you shouldn't do it that way? No, I'm not saying that. But yes, I'm more convinced that if you want to build strength, that the volume has more to do with it than anything else. So I've been pushing myself on the volume. When I was practicing yesterday, I was playing etudes, and I got to where I couldn't play anymore. I'm also playing on my biggest mouthpiece on purpose. But yes, I'm playing etude with the full volume. If it does say piano, I'm only taking it down to mezzo forte. And I can get to fatigue within 5 or 6 etudes, depending on the etude, of course. But yes, I can get to fatigue by that time. I'm hoping. So in 5 days, I have that gig that I probably told you guys last year. I have a brass trio, and we play at the Nutcracker Market, which is a fundraiser for the ballet. And I have a brass trio. I wrote some of the music. You can see the brass trio on my YouTube channel, because I put some of the videos up. And so yes, we play it in a loud auditorium. It's not an auditorium. It's a foyer. So as people are waiting to go into the Nutcracker Market, we're sitting there in the crowd playing Christmas music, and I'm absolutely certain that the volume of the crowd noise, is causing us to play louder than we usually do, and so we get tired faster. Eduardo says, do you usually take it easy the day before a gig? Not normally. Not normally. Um, I'm not a big fan of saving chops. And I've had people chew me out for this, just theoretically, right? Just theoretically, because they don't. Let me tell you what it's not, right? These people that chew me out, they're not chewing me out because I played badly on a gig. They're chewing me out because of the idea that if I don't save my chops, I'm going to sound bad on a gig. And they think that's the worst thing that could happen. How dare you? The way I heard it the very first time, the guy says, you're practicing on your audience. You're practicing on your audience. But in all the years, I've only ever had chop problems since I got sick. In all those years that they were, in theory, chewing me out, I didn't have any performances that I was tired enough that people could tell the difference. Never. In all those years, never. So no, I'm not a big fan of saving chops. That said, I'm in a different place today. I'm gonna go into this new run. The run starts on Wednesday. I'm gonna go into this new run with the old attitude and then adjust if I have to. I've been working on the chops, I've been working on the strength. I'm hoping that's good enough. And when I do this gig, the only one I'm really concerned about is that brass one, the brass trio. Seppo says, which exercise do you find best suitable to play very loud, aiming to embouchure muscle development? I really like, instead of playing loud on exercises, now I do have that exercise that I published on my website, where we do, I call it the dynamic spider long tones. I don't do them, but I do prescribe them to my students. So that's an exercise. But I would much rather that they play something that they'll have to perform, or an etude, or a lyrical study. I would much rather that. I would much, instead of doing an exercise like the static long tone one, I would much rather, and I'm going to improvise this, right? Something like that. I would much rather do that than an exercise for the volume. And in fact, we've talked about this before. When we work on our volume, I don't consider that part of the routine. You know how I'm always teaching 2 or 3 parts of the practice day, right? You've got the exercises, you've got the music. I consider volume dynamics to be musical. Does that make sense? I consider when we try to get louder, I consider that to be a musical endeavor. So, um, etudes, solos, stuff that they have to play for the ensemble. Um, I would strongly recommend. So think about if you're using the ensemble music as music for practicing louder so that you get stronger chops. Think about what this does to the performance because you're not going to play that loud in the performance. So you're using less strength on that very same song than what you're capable of using. It's an amazing approach. Really. I hope that makes sense. So you can even use the songs that they're already playing for the ensemble and just play them very, very loudly. Now it has to be longer notes, right? So if you have dot 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 dot, dot, that's not going to help. And now there are benefits to playing that loud too, but that's not going to help your chops. Karen says, when I get upset, I practice really loudly. I call those musical temper tantrums. The rest of the time, I have to think about it, but it is going well. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. You know, that's how I used to teach the dynamics. That's how I used to do it. I used to have my students. This is when did I teach like that? It was in the late 80s, early 90s. And I would have the students stand up and holler at me, have them scream. And I asked them to pretend that they're angry. I haven't taught this way in decades. I asked them to pretend that they're angry at me. And I'll give them words to say, and I'll have them, right. And then I'll have them transfer all of that to the horn. And that's a great way to access. And so, yes, I said musical temper tantrum, um, not in a derogatory way, but yes, that playing angry does help you. Now, I'm not a big fan of that kind of teaching anymore. You know how people say, use your anger to drive you. You know, the older I get, the more that looks like the dark side of the force. You know, and we know both biblically and scientifically, by the way, we know that anger destroys your body. So, ha, Eduardo says it sounds great, Eddie, kind of like Arturo. Seppo says, in fact, I love to practice loud, but never play loud with my students. I have tried to encourage my pupils to play loud, but they just don't want. Maybe that has something to do with shyness or shame. That's always been an issue. So, and I don't mean to stereotype, but I've had female Chinese students before, and they don't play loud. And I don't think it's in that case, right? It's not shame and it's not shyness. It's just culturally. I've heard many, many times that in some cultures, like the Asian cultures, um, girls they're not loud. They don't and you can imagine that would carry over to the horn, right? So but you know what you can do with them. I said that I'm not a big fan of the anger thing anymore. But as a temporary approach, you can try now, like I said, here's how we do it. We give them something to say in an angry fashion first. Have them scream and holler at, you know, and if they have to come up with somebody that they're actually mad at, that's okay too. As a way to tap into that automatic, right? I just had a thought because I am really against the anger thing. Um, and you could have something more positive on the excitement level, right? But anyway, yes, you get them to first be loud vocally first, and then you get them to transfer that into the horn. And it works. It does work. I'm not saying it works every single time, but it works. So, Karen says playing loudly makes it a little harder to have a good tone for me. That's true for everybody, and it's not just true for loud, it's also true for soft. I said this earlier. The extremes dynamics um, compromise your playing. The only way to get to where you sound better when you're playing louder is familiarity. There's that word again. You make yourself play loud long enough so that you're familiar with it, and then that familiarity translates into getting a better sound at that volume. It's true. The same thing is true for soft, same thing is true for loud. Okay, so the only way you can make yourself sound good at all. So the same rules. Everybody, all these people that want to sell you a product that will give you a good sound. Good sound comes from your subconscious mind. And you cannot manhandle a good sound. And it's just as true for playing loud as it is for playing soft, as it is for when you first got your good sound. Fortunately for you, Karen, you have a very good sound. And when you play loudly, you just need to remember what that good sound sounds like and acknowledge that that's not it, right? When you play loudly, acknowledge that, and I mean mentally, right? Acknowledge inside your head that that doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound as good as you usually sound. And eventually, the good sound will. Now, here's what happens. On the surface, it might seem like that good sound never gets there. But the truth is, the longer you spend playing loud, the louder you can play. So it's a moving target, so to speak. So when you play even louder, then the tone goes away again. So in order to get that beautiful sound, when you're playing loud, you have to go even farther and then back off. But you don't back off all the way to back where you were. You back off, just a little bit behind where you are. So yes, that's an important thing. If you're not getting a bad sound, you're not playing loud enough for the purposes of what we're talking about. Now, remember last week we talked about the hardest thing for me to teach. Because I'm not saying it's okay to get a bad sound. I will never say that. But we have to play loud enough that we get a bad sound to get the physical benefits that I'm talking about with the endurance. I hope that makes sense. So we always hold ourselves to that high standard. We always want to have a beautiful sound. We always want to have very expressive technique. We are not, I mean, very expressive expression. um, and facile technique and all that stuff. We want everything to be the same, even though we are pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone to a place that makes us sound bad. So, in other words, another way to say this is that we never, depending on what we're working on, we never, let me be very specific. If you're playing loud so you can build strength, you never cut back on the volume so that it sounds good. You push through that threshold so that it doesn't sound good. But then that's why I say great trumpet practice is a form of torture. Great trumpet practice is a form of torture. If it's not bothering you, you're not pushing hard enough. Right now, we're talking about the volume. If it sounds good to you, you're not pushing hard enough. Okay? Any other questions before we start? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Thank you, Eduardo. Nice. Thanks for hanging out. Thank you, David. All right, I guess we're gonna close down. Have a great row of gigs. Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Karen. And we'll see you guys next time, all right? Have a great weekend. God bless you. And we'll do it next time. Bye.